My grandmother died in a house worth less than my cousin's car. She wore the same wool coat for 14 years. She drank coffee she ground by hand and grew her own tomatoes. And my mother spent decades being ashamed of her. At the funeral, it was just me. No aunts, no cousins, no flowers but mine. When a stranger in a 4-star general's uniform shook my hand at that cemetery and told me to fly to Geneva, my mother called him a senile old man playing dress-up. She was still laughing about it the day I came back, with documentation that changed everything. She stopped laughing after that.
If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The call came at 5:47 in the morning. I was still in my apartment near Fort Belvoir, boots by the door, uniform hanging pressed and ready. A nurse at Richmond Community Hospital, her voice careful and rehearsed, told me that Dorothea Mercer had passed in the night. Peaceful, she said. No pain. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after I hung up. My grandmother lived in a small house on the east side of Richmond, creaking hardwood floors that she never had fixed because they didn't bother her. A vegetable garden she tended before sunrise every morning, even in her 70s, even when her knees were bad. The smell of hand-ground coffee that soaked into her curtains so deep it never left. The house was worth maybe $90,000. My cousin Deja had a car that cost more than that, and nobody in the family ever thought that was strange. I grew up thinking Thea, that's what I called her, always, because Grandma never sounded right for someone who stood that straight. I grew up thinking she was just private. A lot of older Black women from that generation were private. She didn't explain herself. She didn't talk about the past. She said discipline was kindness. She said kindness was something you owed your future self. And she said it so often it became the architecture of how I moved through the world. It was the reason I enlisted when everybody told me not to. It was the reason I made it through 18 months in a combat zone, stitching soldiers back together while mortar rounds shook the ground. Everything steady about me started with her. I called my mother first. Lorraine picked up on the 4th ring. Her voice was flat, already running calculations I couldn't hear. Well, she said, she lived a long life. Let me know about the arrangements. That was it. No tears. No silence that meant grief was too heavy for words. Just a transaction. I called my sister Simone next. Voicemail. I left a message she wouldn't return for 3 days. That evening, I drove to Thea's house, let myself in with the key she gave me when I was 16, and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. Then I opened drawers I never had reason to open before. In the nightstand, behind her King James Bible and a tin of horehound candy she kept for herself and shared with nobody, I found a sealed envelope. Handwritten across the front in her careful cursive, Section 21. Inside was a military ID card, faded and cracked at the edges. The rank printed on it read, Captain. She never told me she was a captain. I sat there in the dark with that card in my hand and thought about all the things I didn't know about the woman who raised me. Arlington National Cemetery in March is a place that makes you forget how to breathe. Rows of white headstones stretched toward the horizon like a conversation the living weren't part of. The sky was low and gray. Frost clung to the grass. I had looked up Section 21 the night before. A portion of the cemetery reserved for military nurses going back more than a century. Over 300 nurses buried there, women who served in every major conflict since the Civil War. My grandmother had earned her place among them, and I hadn't even known her rank. I hadn't known she served at all. My mother didn't come. She had a closing that afternoon. You understand, Nuri? My sister didn't come either. Simone had an engagement dinner with Derek's family that apparently could not be rescheduled. So it was just me, a chaplain with kind eyes, and a 7-person honor guard. They folded the flag with a movement so precise it hurt to watch. The chaplain said a prayer. The rifles cracked 3 times across the stillness. When it was over, the honor guard left. The chaplain placed his hand on my shoulder for a moment and walked away. I stood alone with the sound of wind moving through bare branches. Then I heard footsteps on wet grass. A man in his early 70s approached from the East Road. He wore a Class A uniform, dark green, brass gleaming even under that overcast sky. 4 stars on each shoulder. I recognized the weight of that rank before I processed anything else. He stopped in front of me and extended his hand. I took it. "Your grandmother saved more lives than most generals I've known," he said. His voice was deep and settled, the kind you'd follow anywhere. "I'm Marcus Elwood. I served with Thea a long time ago." He looked at the headstone for a moment, then back at me. "Fly to Geneva," he said. "There's a foundation near the lake. Give them her name. They'll understand." He pressed a business card into my palm and walked away before I could ask what he meant. I watched him cross back over the wet grass and disappear around the East Road without looking back. I drove home with that card on the passenger seat and a question I couldn't put down. That night, I called my mother and told her about the general. She laughed, not a confused laugh, a dismissive one, which was worse. "Some old man playing soldier at a cemetery," Lorraine said. "Don't waste money flying to Europe over a stranger's feelings. You're a lieutenant, not a millionaire." The way she said lieutenant, like it was a consolation prize you accept when you couldn't get the real thing. I'd deployed to a combat zone. I'd held a 19-year-old private's hand while he bled out waiting for medevac. But to my mother, my service was just a career that didn't come with a corner office. Simone called the next morning. One question, no greeting, no expression of condolences. Did Grandma leave anything valuable in the house? I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. Then I opened my laptop and started searching. Military databases, Army Nurse Corps rosters, Vietnam-era deployment records, awards registers. What came up under Dorothea Elaine Mercer was standard service documentation at first, nothing beyond what you'd expect. But then I found something else, a 1970 field surgical citation that referenced a trauma technique developed in the field, a technique for treating blast wound hemorrhaging. The citation was incomplete. I couldn't find the full record, but a 4-star general doesn't show up at a stranger's burial, not without a reason that outweighs his schedule. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. General Elwood answered on the second ring. He told me Thea served under him at a field hospital in Vietnam. Pleiku, 1969. He said she was the finest surgical nurse he ever commanded. He said what she did after the war, he could not explain over the phone. It was something you needed to see in person. He would not say anything more. I stared at my phone for a long time after he hung up. The last thing Thea would have wanted was for me to ignore a 4-star general's direct guidance. I used leave days and most of my savings to buy the ticket. 9 hours from Dulles to Geneva. My mother's reaction was exactly what I expected. "You're throwing rent money after ghost stories. Your grandmother lived in a shack, Camille. There is nothing in Geneva for this family." I packed light. The envelope from the nightstand. The faded captain's ID. A small leather notebook I'd found in the house, filled with Thea's handwriting. Names, dates, numbers, some of it in a shorthand I couldn't parse. The flight was long enough to doubt everything. Maybe Lorraine was right. Maybe Elwood was sentimental. Maybe I'd come home with less money and no answers. Then the taxi dropped me at a stone building near Lake Geneva. Old European architecture, ivy climbing the walls, a brass plaque by the door I couldn't read from the street. Inside the lobby smelled like lemon polish and old paper. A woman behind a mahogany reception desk looked up. "Your name?" "Camille Mercer." A pause. Her fingers stopped over her keyboard. "And your grandmother's name?" "Dorothea Mercer." Something shifted behind her eyes. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly in French, and set it down. "One moment, please." 2 minutes passed. A door opened at the far end of the hall. A woman in her late 60s stepped out. Silver hair, gray suit. posture that suggested decades of boardrooms and precision. She crossed the lobby with the measured pace of someone who didn't waste motion. She stopped in front of me and extended her hand. "Ms. Mercer," she said, "we've been expecting you for some time." Her name was Marguerite Fontenot. She was 68 years old, a trust attorney who had managed Thea's affairs for more than 2 decades. The way she spoke about my grandmother, with precision, but also with something quieter underneath, told me this was not a routine client relationship. She led me down a corridor lined with framed photographs I didn't have time to read. I understood that whatever waited at the end of that hallway was going to change the shape of everything I thought I knew. The conference room had a long walnut table and windows overlooking the lake. Gray water, gray sky, the Alps somewhere behind the clouds. Marguerite set a leather binder in front of me and opened it to the first page. She spoke without ceremony. 22 years ago, she said, your grandmother established an irrevocable charitable trust through this foundation. It was funded by royalties from a patent she co-developed, a field surgical technique for treating blast wound hemorrhaging in combat conditions. The United States military adopted the technique in the late 1980s. The royalties accumulated over 3 decades. I stared at her. The current value of the trust, Marguerite said, is $12,400,000. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. The trust's sole purpose, she continued, is to provide financial assistance to combat veterans facing hardship, surgical procedures, vocational training, housing stabilization, emergency support. Over 22 years, it has served 247 individuals. Every case is documented. She turned the binder to a section of records, names, dates, dollar amounts, photographs of men and women I had never met, each with a story that started in a foxhole or a field hospital and ended with a second chance. A man standing in front of a carpentry shop with a wide smile, a woman in scrubs outside a hospital entrance, a family in front of a modest house, the father in a wheelchair, everyone looking at the camera like they couldn't believe the day was real. Your grandmother designated you as successor trustee, Marguerite said. You and only you will oversee this trust going forward. Why me? Marguerite paused. Then she reached into the binder and removed a sealed envelope. My name on the front, Thea's handwriting. She left this for you, Marguerite said. She specifically excluded all other family members from any role in this trust. Her instructions were very clear, Ms. Mercer. I held the envelope and felt the weight of $12 million pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat I hadn't known was there. I opened it alone in my hotel room overlooking the lake. The paper was thin, the same stationery she used for grocery lists and birthday cards. Nothing fancy. That was Thea Mercer. Her handwriting was steady, no tremor, no hesitation. She'd written this years ago when her hands were still sure. Camille, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've met Marguerite. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I kept it from everyone, and I'll explain why. Every dollar I kept for myself was a dollar someone in worse shape didn't get. I saw boys 18, 19 years old lose their legs, their sight, their minds, in places the world forgot about. The VA tried. It wasn't enough. So I built something that could be. Your mother will want this money. Your sister will want this money. They'll tell you I was confused or selfish or that blood comes first. Don't believe them. Blood came first for me too. But some debts aren't paid with money. They're paid with discipline. I chose you because you're the only one who understands that. You chose the army when everyone told you not to. You chose hard over easy. That's all I need to know. Don't break this trust. Don't let anyone turn it into something that serves vanity instead of need. Discipline is kindness, baby. Kindness to your future self. I love you. Now go do the work. Thea. I read it 3 times. cried twice. Then I folded it back into the envelope, washed my face, and called Marguerite. I'm honoring every word, I said. I expected nothing less, she said. Before I could hang up, my phone buzzed. A text from Simone. Mom says you went to Europe. Are you out of your mind? We need to talk about Grandma's house. The work was already starting. I landed back in Virginia on a Thursday evening and found my mother waiting in my apartment lobby. She'd driven 2 hours from Richmond, which meant she already knew something. She'd found my Geneva flight confirmation on the shared laptop, an old login I'd forgotten to clear. A mistake I would not repeat. We sat at my kitchen table. I told her the broad truth, the trust, the charitable foundation. My role as successor trustee. I didn't show her the letter. Some things belong only to the people they were written for. Lorraine listened with the stillness I recognized, the same silence she used when calculating commission on a listing she wanted badly. Her eyes didn't go wider. They went sharper, like a lens adjusting. How much? She asked. 12 million. Something moved across her face that wasn't grief. That money belongs to this family, she said. Your grandmother was my mother. It's an irrevocable charitable trust, Mom. It supports veterans. It's not an inheritance. You're telling me my mother had $12 million? She looked at me like I'd said something in another language. And we lived the way we lived. And she gave it to strangers. She gave it to people who lost limbs in combat. Lorraine stood. Her chair scraped the floor. I grew up embarrassed, Camille. I lied about where I came from. I wore the same clothes 3 days in a row because my mother, apparently sitting on a fortune, chose to live like she had nothing. And you're going to sit here and tell me that money isn't ours. I'm telling you it legally isn't and morally isn't. Her jaw tightened. Something moved behind her expression. Not grief, not anger. Strategy. I'll hire a lawyer, she said quietly. We'll see how irrevocable this trust really is. She picked up her purse and left without saying goodbye. The door didn't slam. Lorraine never slammed doors. She just closed them in a way that made you feel locked out. My sister called the next morning. She opened sweet. Simone always opened sweet when she wanted something. Camille, I'm so happy for you. Grandma must have really trusted you. I waited. So, she said, about the wedding. There it was. Simone had booked Whitfield Country Club for a June ceremony. $40,000 already deposited, another $140,000 outstanding. A $180,000 wedding for a couple who financed their engagement ring on a payment plan. Just a small portion of the trust could cover it. Grandma would have wanted her granddaughter to have a beautiful wedding, don't you think? Grandma wanted that money to help wounded veterans, I said. That's exactly what it does. Silence. Then the sweetness curdled the way it always eventually did. You always acted like you were better than us because you sat in that moldy house with her, playing soldier, playing hero, playing martyr. This is a family matter, Camille. You're hoarding $12 million that should be ours. I deployed to a combat zone, Simone, and now you're sitting on money that should belong to this family. I ended the call. Within 48 hours, Lorraine activated her network. Her version of the story spread through the family like fire through dry brush. Camille is hoarding Thea's fortune. She won't share a penny with her own mother. No mention of the veterans. No mention of the trust being irrevocable. No mention of Thea's letter or her wishes. Just a 29-year-old lieutenant who was too selfish to take care of her family. I called General Elwood that evening and told him everything. I've seen families tear apart over less, he said. His voice was steady, the kind of calm that comes from decades of command. Document everything. And don't be alone when they confront you. I thanked him and sat in the silence of my apartment, realizing I was about to fight a war with no uniform and no rules of engagement. 2 weeks after Geneva, my mother staged an intervention. She called it a family dinner. It was a tribunal. Lorraine's dining room in Richmond. Long table. Good china she only used when she needed to establish something. Present: Lorraine, Simone, and Derek, my Aunt Gloria, Lorraine's younger sister, who defers to her in everything, and Uncle Raymond, who mostly stared at his plate. Lorraine had prepared remarks. She actually had notes on index cards. She held them like a professor with a syllabus. Thea was mentally unstable in her later years, Lorraine said. She clearly wasn't capable of setting up a trust of this size. We believe the paperwork may be compromised. Aunt Gloria nodded. Lorraine's right. Mama always said Thea was eccentric. Like eccentric was a diagnosis. I let them finish. Then I spoke. Thea established this trust 22 years ago, I said. She was 60 years old. Her doctors confirmed full cognitive capacity at the time of formation and at every annual review since. The trust has been audited annually for 2 decades, administered under Swiss fiduciary law, and fully compliant with U.S. tax code. Her trust attorney has managed it the entire time without a single legal challenge. Lorraine's index cards trembled slightly. You're 29 years old, she said. A first lieutenant making base pay. You think you can manage $12 million? I'm not managing the money, Mom. I'm protecting its purpose. There's a difference. The purpose should be this family. The purpose is 247 veterans who had no one else. The room went quiet. Derek leaned toward Simone and thought he was whispering. Don't worry, he said. My firm has estate lawyers. We'll find a way. I heard every word. I stood up, folded my napkin, and placed it beside my plate the way Thea taught me. You leave a table the way you found it. I love this family, I said, but I will not apologize for honoring my grandmother's wishes. And I won't pretend that wanting her money is the same thing as missing her. I drove back to Fort Belvoir in the dark, gripping the wheel hard enough to leave marks on my palms. The next morning, I ran 5 miles before the sun cleared the trees, and by mile 3 I had a plan. I video called Marguerite Fontenot in Geneva. My mother has hired an estate attorney, I told her, a man named Gerald Stanhope, corner office in downtown Richmond, glass desk, the whole performance. Marguerite's expression didn't change. She'd been doing this longer than I'd been alive. The trust is irrevocable and administered under Swiss law with full U.S. compliance, she said. Your mother has no legal standing. Any challenge filed in a Virginia court will be dismissed for lack of jurisdiction over the trust corpus. If they persist, they will owe opposing counsel's fees, including international counsel. She sent me a 4-page summary letter that read like a polite wall of steel, the kind of document that makes you feel the foundation under your feet. Before she hung up, she said something I wasn't expecting. Nuri, your grandmother anticipated this. She told me years ago. She said, Marguerite, my daughter will try to take it. That's why I chose Camille. Hearing Thea's words through someone else's voice hollowed me out for a moment. Then I straightened my spine the way she taught me and got back to work. I spent the following week reaching out to veterans the trust had supported. I needed to understand the full scope of what Thea had built. The first to call back was Theodore Banks, 63 years old, infantry, double below-knee amputation from a roadside device in 2001. The VA covered his initial care and basic prosthetics. 3 years later, when he needed the advanced models, the ones that let him stand at a workbench for 8 hours straight, the funding was gone. Thea's trust paid $47,000. Theodore now ran a vocational training shop outside Fredericksburg. 3 employees, 2 of them veterans. He'd kept every letter Thea ever sent him. 1 per year, every year, signed only with her initials. She came every spring with sweet potato pie, he said. Never wanted credit, never mentioned her family. He paused. If you ever need people to stand up and say what that woman did, Ms. Mercer, I will bring 50 guys who owe her everything. I drove back to Fort Belvoir that night, knowing I wouldn't have to fight this alone. Stanhope called Lorraine after reviewing the documentation. I wasn't on the call, but Simone filled me in later. His advice was direct. This trust is airtight. Swiss administered, IRS compliant. 22 years of clean audits. You'd be spending significant money to lose. Lorraine's response, relayed through Simone, find another angle. There was no other angle. But Lorraine didn't operate on legal logic. She operated on will. 3 days later, she changed strategy entirely. The Facebook post appeared on a Tuesday evening. She didn't use my name directly. She didn't have to. Everyone in her circle knew exactly who she meant. When a mother loses her own mother and discovers that the inheritance meant for her family is being withheld by someone who refuses to share, you realize what family really means to some people. Some people have forgotten where they come from. Pray for me. 47 likes in 3 hours. Aunt Gloria shared it with a comment implying Thea had been confused and taken advantage of toward the end. Church friends weighed in. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The messages started arriving. Nuri, your mom is really hurting. Can't you just give them something? Family is everything. Money isn't worth this. I heard your grandmother wasn't herself at the end. Maybe the trust isn't what you think it is. I didn't respond to any of them. I went to work, showed up to formation, completed my duties, kept my head level. One afternoon, a colleague pulled me aside after PT. Hey, Mercer, saw your mom's post. My wife follows her. Is everything okay? My grandmother helped 247 people in complete silence. My mother couldn't go 2 days without an audience. That evening, I opened my email and found something that changed the temperature of everything. A message from Patricia Osei, investigative reporter at the Richmond Register. Ms. Mercer, I'm working on a story about a local military officer who controls a charitable fund established by her late grandmother. Would you be available for comment? I read it twice. Patricia Osei didn't do soft features or feel-good local interest pieces. She had a byline in 3 major papers. She was not someone Derek's college buddy had called in a favor from. Someone had pitched her a real story. And from the framing of her email, I could tell exactly which version she'd been given. I took a weekend pass and drove out to Fredericksburg to meet Theodore Banks in person. His shop sat at the end of a gravel road, a converted barn with sawdust on the floor and the smell of fresh-cut oak. A hand-painted sign over the door read, Banks Custom Carpentry. 3 employees visible inside, one of them walking a customer through a sample board. Theodore met me at the entrance, broad-shouldered, standing steady on prosthetic legs that moved with practiced ease. His handshake was the firmest I'd felt since General Elwood's. So you're Thea's granddaughter, he said. The soldier. She would have loved that. We sat in his office, a small room with a wood stove and photographs of finished projects on every wall, dining tables, porch chairs, built-in bookshelves, a children's bed shaped like a boat. Theodore told me his story without decoration. Iraq, roadside device, both legs below the knee. A year at Walter Reed. The VA got him on his feet, literally. But 3 years out, when the basic prosthetics wore down and the advanced ones that let him actually live his life were out of reach, the system had moved on. Your grandmother paid $47,000, he said. He pulled a wooden box from the shelf behind him. Inside were letters, 1 per year going back nearly 20 years, each one on plain stationery, each one signed R.M. I never knew her full name until she told me herself, the second year she visited. She showed up at my door with a sweet potato pie in a ceramic dish and sat at my kitchen table for an hour asking about my kids by name. She knew my kids' names, Ms. Mercer. I never told her. She just remembered. He introduced me to 2 other veterans in the area. Different wounds, different years, same story. A quiet intervention from a woman who could have been comfortable and chose not to be. Before I left, Theodore walked me to my car. He looked at me the way people look when they owe something they can never fully repay. "You call me if you need people who will stand up and say what she was," he said. "I'll bring everyone she ever helped who can still walk into a room." I drove back to the base, knowing that whatever came next, I wasn't alone. Lorraine found a second attorney, someone less cautious than Stanhope, someone willing to file a challenge in Virginia court on the theory that Thea lacked testamentary capacity at the time of the trust's formation, a long shot wrapped in desperation and dressed up in legal language. An email arrived on a Wednesday evening, copied to Simone, Derek, Aunt Gloria, and me. Lorraine's words, but clearly drafted with legal input. "Camille, you have until Simone's engagement party to agree to a redistribution of the trust assets among immediate family members. If you refuse, we will proceed with legal action in Virginia and cooperate fully with media inquiries regarding the fund's administration. This is your last chance to do the right thing for your family. An ultimatum delivered like a cease and desist letter to your own daughter." I forwarded it to Marguerite. "Let them file," she said. Her tone hadn't changed once in the entire time I'd known her. "Virginia courts have no jurisdiction over the trust corpus. It's administered under Swiss law. Any filing will be dismissed within 60 days, and they will owe costs. I'll prepare a formal response." I thanked her. Then I sat with the harder question. Simone's engagement party was in 10 days. Whitfield Country Club, 80 guests, champagne, a celebration I'd been invited to before any of this started, back when I was just the younger sister who chose the army over a real career. I could skip it. Nobody would blame me. Lorraine had turned it into a battlefield, but I kept hearing General Elwood. "Don't be alone when they confront you." And then I thought about something else. Lorraine had invited Patricia Osei to the party, not to write a feature about the happy couple, to witness what she believed would be my public surrender. She wanted the confrontation on record. She wanted witnesses to her version. Fine. If she wanted witnesses, I'd bring better ones. I called General Elwood that night. "They've given me a deadline," I said. "My mother plans to make a speech in front of 80 people accusing me of stealing from the family. She's invited a journalist." Elwood was quiet for a moment. Then Ruth, Thea, told me this would happen. She said, "Marcus, my daughter will try to take it." That's exactly why I chose Camille. "Sir, I don't want to turn my sister's party into something ugly. It's already something ugly, Lieutenant. Your mother made it that way the morning she sent that email. All I'm offering is the truth." He was right. Diane had chosen the venue, the audience, the narrative. She'd invited the press. She was counting on me being alone, outgunned, and too loyal to fight back publicly. "I'll come," Elwood said, "and I won't come alone. But only if they go first. I won't walk into your sister's party and start something." "Agreed," I said. "If my mother doesn't attack, we're just guests paying respects." He called Theodore Banks that night. Theodore called 4 other veterans the trust had supported. 5 men, 5 lives, 5 debts owed to a woman nobody in my family had ever properly seen. "We'll be there at 6, Elwood said. "Dress attire." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Military habit. 3 days before the party, Simone texted asking to meet. "Just as sisters," she said. "Neutral cafe and short pump." She was already there when I arrived, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes soft and wet. Real tears, probably. Simone had always been good at crying when it served her. I sat down and waited. "The catering balance is due Friday," she said. "Derek's parents are pulling back their contribution. His dad had a bad quarter. Mom and I are already stretched and I can't—" She looked up at me. "I'm not asking you to dismantle the trust, Camille. Just a portion. Just enough to cover the balance. Grandma would have wanted her granddaughter to have a beautiful wedding." I looked at her across the table. When was the last time you visited her? Her mouth opened, closed. She was in a hospital bed for 3 weeks before she died, Simone. You didn't come once. I was in the middle of wedding planning. You know how much goes into... She was dying. Simone's jaw set. The tears dried faster than they'd appeared. She was old and boring, Nori. She had nothing to offer. She lived in a falling-apart house and smelled like coffee grounds. She looked at me hard, but apparently she had $12 million, and you're sitting on it like a dragon. There it was. The real Simone, underneath the sister talk and the soft opener and the wedding dreams. That money saved 247 veterans' lives, I said. Your wedding budget wouldn't save one. She flinched. Then she leaned forward. Mom forwarded your email threads about the trust to Patricia Osei. She got them from the shared laptop. I just thought you should know. I went completely still. She said it was still technically her laptop. It was my private correspondence about a legal trust. Simone shrugged the way people do when they've already decided something isn't their problem. I stood up. Thank you for telling me, I said. I picked up my bag and walked out. The coffee was still warm. I didn't go back for it. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, thinking about what this meant. Patricia Osei had been given internal details, email threads that could be framed to support Lorraine's version of events. She'd been handed a partial story carefully stripped of context. I could not take that back. I could not correct what had already been shared. The only thing I could do was show up with better truth than what they'd been given. I called General Elwood and told him to come. The night before the party, I drove to Thea's house. I let myself in. The air still smelled like coffee and old wood, like time had made a decision to stay. I sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she drilled me on pressure points and tourniquet application before I ever set foot at Fort Sam Houston, where she said discipline is kindness so many times it became the rhythm of my breathing. I opened the leather notebook, page after page, name after name. In Thea's careful handwriting, each entry was a life: Theodore Banks, prosthetics, 2004, 47,000, Miriam Cole, housing stabilization, 2009, 22,000, David Rena, college fund for children, 2015, 35,000, 247 names. 247 people who went to sleep one night thinking they had nothing left and woke up because a woman in a $90,000 house on the east side of Richmond decided they mattered. I closed the notebook and pressed it against my chest. My phone buzzed. General Elwood, dress blues. We'll be there by 6. Then Theodore Banks, bringing the boys. We're not missing this. Then an email from Lorraine, copied to everyone. Tomorrow I'm setting the record straight in front of everyone. You had your chance, Camille. I set the phone down and looked around the house. The creaking floor she never had fixed. The vegetable garden visible through the kitchen window, still dormant in March cold. This house was worth maybe $90,000. The woman who lived in it gave away $12 million, and the family that ignored her for decades now wanted every cent. I slept in her bed that night. The sheets still smelled like lavender and camphor. In the morning, I pressed my Class A uniform, laced my boots, squared my cover, and drove to Whitfield Country Club with Thea's notebook in my bag, ready for whatever came next. Whitfield Country Club sat on a hill outside Richmond. Old money architecture, white columns, a circular drive lined with dogwood trees that hadn't bloomed yet. The kind of place that whispered you either belonged or you didn't. 6:30 on a Saturday evening. 80-plus guests filtering through the double doors into a ballroom dressed for celebration. White flowers on every table. A banner in gold script. Simone and Derek. Champagne towers. A string quartet in the corner. The kind of event that costs more than most people's cars and looks like it. Lorraine was everywhere. Sequined dress, hair fresh from the salon, moving between tables with the energy of a woman running a campaign, not a party, touching arms, laughing on cue. Leaning in close to whisper things that made other people nod, she was in her element. Simone stood beside Derek near the head table, radiant in the careful way that requires real effort to maintain. She saw me walk in. Something moved behind her eyes that wasn't warmth. I arrived in my Class A uniform. I'd come straight from a function at the base, which was true, but the uniform changed the way people looked at me, and I knew it. Dress screens, ribbons, above the left breast pocket. Service wasn't a costume, but in a room full of people who'd been told a story, it was a reminder that there was more than one kind of record. Lorraine spotted me from across the room. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh," she said, "you actually came. Brave." I nodded and found a seat near the back. 7 minutes later, a staff member approached me. Young woman, clipboard, slightly flustered. "Ma'am, there are some military gentlemen at the side entrance asking for you." I stood up. General Marcus Elwood. Theodore Banks. 4 other veterans. Elwood in full dress uniform, 4 stars polished to mirrors, every ribbon in precise order. Theodore in a dark suit, standing straight on his prosthetic legs. The others in veterans' formal wear, clean, pressed, medals pinned, back straight. The kind of men who learned a long time ago how to occupy a room without raising their voice. "Evening, Lieutenant," Elwood said. "Evening, sir." "They're with me," I told the staff member. A 4-star general walking into a country club ballroom turns heads the way gravity does. You don't see the pull, you just notice everything bending toward it. The room noticed. Lorraine noticed. Patricia Osei, the journalist, was already seated near the bar with her notebook open. She noticed too. The toast began at 7:15. Derek's father went first. Gracious. 3 minutes, love and new beginnings. Then Derek himself, charming in the rehearsed way of men who practice in mirrors. The room was warm and easy and celebrating. Then Lorraine took the microphone. She started soft. "I want to thank each of you for being here to celebrate Simone and Derek. Family is the foundation of everything we do, and tonight is a reminder of how much love surrounds this table." Applause, glasses raised. Then the shift. Her voice tightened, pitched higher, carrying across the room with the confidence of a woman who had practiced this in front of a mirror and knew exactly how it would land. "But I also need to address something. As many of you know, our family recently lost my mother, Ruth. Some of you knew her as Thea. And after her passing, we discovered she'd left behind a significant fund." She paused for effect. "Unfortunately, my younger daughter, Camille, has decided to keep it all. $12 million, kept from her own mother, kept from her sister on a night that should be about love and family." She turned toward my table. 80 pairs of eyes followed. "I ask you, is that right? Is that what family means?" Murmurs rippled through the room. I felt the weight of judgment from people who didn't know a single fact about the trust or Thea's wishes, or the 247 veterans whose second chances depended on that money staying exactly where it was. "I just want what's fair," Lorraine said, "for my family." She set the microphone down and looked at me, waiting for me to crumble, to cry, to apologize in front of everyone she'd invited for the purpose of watching it happen. I stood up, 3 seconds of silence, long enough for 80 people to hold their breath. Then I walked to the microphone. I didn't raise my voice. The uniform did half the work. The silence did the rest. My grandmother, Dorothea Elaine Mercer, was a captain in the United States Army Nurse Corps. I let it land. She served in Vietnam at a field hospital in Pleiku, 1969. She triaged soldiers under mortar fire and worked through a direct attack that wounded 14 men in a single night. She took shrapnel in her shoulder during that attack. She refused to stop working. She refused the Purple Heart afterward. Her words, as recorded in the citation, were, "I wasn't the one who was wounded. The soldiers were. Nobody moved." After the war, she co-developed a surgical technique for treating blast wound hemorrhaging in field conditions. The United States military adopted it. The patent royalties accumulated over 30 years and funded an irrevocable charitable trust. I looked at Lorraine. That trust, $12,400,000, exists for one purpose: to support combat veterans who have nowhere else to turn. In 22 years, it has helped 247 people, men and women who lost legs, sight, homes, and the ability to imagine a future. I paused. I didn't choose to keep this from my family. My grandmother chose to give it to people who needed it more. She lived in a small house. She wore the same coat for 14 years. She brewed her own coffee every morning, not because she had to, but because every dollar she didn't spend was a dollar that went to someone who had lost everything in service to this country. The room was silent, in a way I'd only experienced in the field. The silence, after an explosion, when the air hasn't decided whether to rush back in. I have someone here who can tell you more about what that money actually meant. I turned toward the side of the room. General Elwood, a 4-star general rising from his chair, makes a room understand in an instant that everything they just heard from the woman at the head table was wrong. General Marcus Elwood walked to the front of that ballroom like he was crossing a parade ground. Measured steps, shoulders back, 4 stars catching the chandelier light. 80 guests went absolutely still. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I served 38 years in the United States Army. I commanded brigades. I planned operations that made the evening news. I have shaken hands with heads of state, but the most courageous person I ever served alongside was a 5'3" Army nurse named Dorothea Mercer." He told them about Pleiku, the night of the mortar attack. 14 casualties in 4 hours. Thea triaging under fire with gauze taped over her own wound, not stopping, not once, until every man was stable. He described her turning down the Purple Heart and the quiet he kept in her voice when she explained why. Then he stepped aside and looked toward the back of the room. Theodore Banks stood up. The room saw his prosthetic legs, the way the suit trousers draped over them. He didn't adjust his stance or try to minimize it. He just stood there, steady and deliberate. "My name is Theodore Banks. Dorothea Mercer paid for these legs. The VA couldn't cover what I needed. She could. I own a carpentry shop now. 3 employees, 2 of them veterans. I built the furniture in my kids' bedrooms. I stood at my daughter's graduation because of that woman." He sat down. A second man stood. David Rena. Thea's trust had paid for his children's college tuition when 3 deployments left him unable to hold steady employment. He had a daughter in medical school now. A third, Paul Hessler. Thea had covered his mortgage during a medical discharge that nearly put him on the street. A fourth, Marcus Cole. She funded his PTSD treatment program. He looked around the room when he said it, not ashamed. "I'm alive because of her. One by one. 5 veterans, 5 lives, 5 debts owed to a woman who died in a house worth $90,000 and never once asked for a receipt." The applause started at one table near the window, then another. Then it spread the way real things do. You can't manufacture it. You can't time it. It just comes from the chest and keeps going. Not polite, not performed. Lorraine stood frozen at her table, one hand on the tablecloth. Simone's face had gone the color of old cream. Derek was already outside, phone pressed to his ear. Patricia Osei had lowered her notebook. She was staring at the 5 men in the room with the expression of a journalist who had just been handed a completely different story than the one she came to write. Lorraine grabbed the microphone. Her hand was shaking. Her voice cracked on the first word, "This is my mother's money," she said. "Mine. You don't know what it's like, growing up with nothing because your own mother chose to be poor. You don't know what it's like being ashamed of where you come from when she could have fixed it, when she chose not to." The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't reverence. It was the Lorraine pulled free and looked around the room. She saw what I saw, faces that had shifted, people setting down their champagne, a woman at the third table picking up her purse. Lorraine's book club friend of 15 years, a woman named Carol, stood up quietly, without drama, and walked out. 2 couples followed. Derek reappeared in the doorway, phone still in hand, face the color of old paper. He went straight to Simone. His voice wasn't quiet anymore. "My parents just texted. They're not comfortable coming to the wedding after this." Simone's face went somewhere I couldn't read, just for a second, before she rebuilt it. The wedding coordinator, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Hargrave, appeared from the kitchen entrance and pulled Simone aside with a clipboard and the universal posture of someone who needs to discuss money that's owed. Patricia Osei crossed the room toward me. Her notebook was closed. "Ms. Mercer," she said, "I was invited here to write a different story." She looked at the 5 veterans still standing near the side wall, at Elwood, at the half-empty ballroom, at Lorraine alone at the head table staring at a centerpiece like it owed her something. "This is the one I'm going to write." The party didn't end. It dissolved. Over the next 30 minutes, the ballroom emptied in slow motion. Most guests stopped to shake the veterans' hands on their way out. Several came to me directly. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Your grandmother sounds extraordinary." Before he left, Theodore reached into his jacket and handed me a small box. Inside was a purple heart medal, bronze enamel, George Washington's profile. "She earned this," he said. "She never picked it up. The VA still had it on file. I called in a favor. I held it in my palm. It weighed almost nothing. It meant everything." "She said she wasn't the one who was wounded," Theodore said. "But I think she was, just not in the way that gets documented." I stayed with the veterans until the room was nearly empty. Lorraine sat alone at her table with one untouched glass of champagne, still staring forward. I didn't go to her. That wasn't the night for it. Patricia Osei published her piece 4 days later in the Richmond Times-Dispatch. The headline, "The Army Nurse Who Gave $12 million in Silence, and the Granddaughter Who Kept Her Promise." It was the kind of article that makes you put your coffee down and read it twice. Patricia had done everything right. Interviews with General Elwood and Theodore Banks, 2 other veterans from the Trust's records, Marguerite Fontenot, by phone, from Geneva. She pulled Thea's full military service record and confirmed the patent. She spoke to 3 guests at the engagement party, all on the record. She cross-referenced the Trust's charitable filings with Swiss Foundation records going back 20 years. The article didn't attack Lorraine by name. It didn't need to. The contrast between Thea's quiet generosity and the family's public demand for the money spoke clearly enough. One paragraph noted that family members had sought to redirect the Trust's charitable assets for personal use following the trustee's death. 80 people at that party knew exactly who that meant. The article went digital at 6 in the morning. By noon, it had been shared more than 50,000 times. By evening, it was on the front page of 3 major veterans forums and trending under a hashtag I didn't create and couldn't control. Lorraine's Facebook post was still public. The comment section transformed overnight. Strangers who'd read the article flooded it with responses she couldn't delete fast enough. Aunt Gloria called Lorraine that afternoon. I wasn't on the call, but Simone told me about it later. "You told me Thea was confused," Gloria said. "You told me she was deteriorating. You lied to me, Lorraine, about our own mother." Gloria hung up. 26 years of sisterhood dissolved in a phone call. Stanhope called Lorraine the next morning. I'm withdrawing from the case. The second attorney, the one who'd agreed to file the capacity challenge, read the article and called 2 days later. This case is unwinnable and reputationally toxic. I can't attach my name to it. The fallout reached Simone 3 days after publication. Derek's parents called her directly. Lydia Prescott's voice was warm and regretful in equal measure. "We love you, sweetheart." But what happened at that party? Demanding money from a veteran's trust in front of all those people. We need some distance. Derek came home that evening with an overnight bag already packed. "I can't start a marriage standing in the middle of this, Brooke. I need time." He didn't say how much. He didn't have to. The bag said enough. The wedding was postponed indefinitely. Whitfield Country Club retained the $40,000 deposit under the cancellation penalty clause. Ms. Hargrave was sympathetic in the way people are sympathetic when contracts are involved. Simone called me for the first time in weeks, not to demand, not to strategize, just to cry. I listened. I didn't say I told you so. I never would. "I'm sorry this is happening to you," I said, and I meant it. "Everything is falling apart," she whispered. "I know." Long silence. Then, "Can you just fix it? I can't break the trust, Simone, and I won't pretend that what you and Mom did was okay." She didn't say anything for a long time. "Mom told me for years that Grandma didn't love us," she finally said. "She said Grandma was cold, selfish, chose her own comfort over family. I believed her, Camille. I believed her for 20 years. Grandma wrote letters to every veteran she helped. She knew their children's names. She visited Theodore Banks every spring for nearly 2 decades with sweet potato pie. She never visited us. You never invited her." The line went quiet for a long time. Then Simone hung up. Not angry, just empty. I set the phone down and looked at the Purple Heart on my desk. On the other side of the ledger, the trust received $340,000 in unsolicited donations in the 2 weeks following the article. Veterans, organizations shared the story across their networks. Lorraine lost 3 real estate clients within the week. When they Googled her name, the article loaded before her listings. One couple relocating from Northern Virginia emailed to say they decided to go in a different direction. The others simply stopped returning her calls. Thea built her trust in silence. It took one newspaper article to show the world what silence looks like when it's worth $12 million. I still report for duty at Fort Belvoir every morning. Still wear the uniform. Still do the work that Thea's sacrifice, and the sacrifices of hundreds of thousands of people before me, made possible. I moved into her house, fixed the floors, patched the roof, kept the vegetable garden alive, tomatoes, basil, and the stubborn rosemary bush she planted the year I enlisted. The coffee still brews the same way. Hand-ground French press, strong enough to make your teeth ache. I drink it at her kitchen table every morning before the sun is fully up and think about what it means to carry something forward instead of just holding it. I invited Lorraine for coffee on a Tuesday morning, not at her house, not at Thea's, a cafe on Broad Street, public, neutral, well-lit, the kind of place where voices stay level because other people are watching. She arrived in a navy blouse and no makeup. I had never seen my mother leave the house without makeup in my entire life. Something had shifted. Something had compressed. We ordered. I waited until the cups were in our hands. "I'm not going to apologize for honoring Grandma's trust," I said, "and I need you to stop telling people I stole from this family. The trust is irrevocable. No court, no attorney, no Facebook post will change that. This is settled. 3 conditions. I had them written in the notebook I carried, not on index cards. That was her method. Just 3 lines in my own handwriting. No more lies about the trust. Not to family, not to friends, not online. No more pressure of any kind to redistribute funds that belong to veterans. And a genuine acknowledgement, not for me, but for Thea's memory, that what she built matters. Lorraine looked at her coffee and stirred it and didn't drink. She sat with it for a long time, long enough that the couple at the next table finished their scones and left. I don't know if I can do that yet, she said, not defiant. Honest, the way people are when they've stopped performing. Then I'll be here when you're ready. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand once, brief, firm, the way Thea would have done it. Then I stood up, left money on the table, and walked out into the sunlight. She didn't follow, but she didn't argue either. Sometimes that's the first word of a sentence you haven't learned to finish yet. Simone called on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after that coffee. Her voice was lighter and heavier at the same time, the way people sound when they've put something down they've been carrying for too long. I went to Grandma's house last week, she said. I set down the report I was reading. I sat in her kitchen for an hour. I found the drafts, Camille, the letters she wrote to the veterans, not typed, handwritten, drafts and final copies and notes in the margins. She knew their children's names. She knew their anniversaries. She asked about their soccer games and their report cards and their job interviews. She remembered everything. I didn't say anything. I let her find the words herself. I called her boring, Simone said quietly. I said she had nothing to offer, and she was keeping track of 247 families like they were her own. For 22 years, that's who she was. Silence, then quieter. Can I visit the trust? Meet some of the people she helped? I hadn't mapped that outcome. The Army teaches you to plan for contingencies, but my sister volunteering to engage with the trust wasn't anywhere on the list. Yes, I said, I'd like that. I started volunteering at the VA hospital, she said, twice a month, reading to patients mostly. It's harder than I expected, but it helps. That would have made Grandma proud. She paused. Chad texted last week. He wants to talk. How do you feel about that? Not ready. I need to fix me first. I almost smiled. I need to fix me first was the most Thea Mercer thing Simone had ever said in her life. The Trust Advisory Board met in April, Geneva time. I joined by secure video from a conference room at Fort Belvoir. Marguerite chaired the session. General Elwood attended by video. 2 financial advisors from the foundation and a veterans advocacy director named Claire Weston. Following the media coverage, Marguerite said, the trust received $340,000 in unsolicited contributions. Combined with existing assets and quarterly returns, the total fund now stands at $12,740,000. The board proposed expanding the mission to include mental health support for veterans experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, 30 to 40 additional individuals annually through partnerships with 3 established treatment centers, covering costs that VA waitlists couldn't reach. As successor trustee, Marguerite said, you have the final word. I'd spent the previous week reviewing every document and speaking with Theodore and 2 other recipients about what veterans actually needed most. I was ready. I support the expansion, I said, and I want to propose one addition, a fellowship for military nurses and combat medics entering the field, funded at $50,000 per year for training and mentorship. Named the Dorothea Mercer Fellowship. The board voted unanimously. General Elwood leaned into his camera. You didn't just protect it, Camille. You grew it. Marguerite added one last note. We received an anonymous donation this morning. $500,000. The donor's note says they served with Thea and never found the right moment to say thank you. I looked at the screen, at the numbers, at these faces gathered across 2 continents around something Thea built in silence for 22 years without ever once asking to be seen. The first real smile since the morning she died. The National Veterans Advocacy Coalition invited me to speak at their annual gala, a ballroom 3 times the size of Whitfield Country Club, 300 guests, military officers, congressional representatives, foundation directors, press. I almost said no. Thea never wanted a spotlight. But then I thought about what she actually did with her life, which was spend it making sure other people were seen, people the world had stopped looking at. Maybe it was time for someone to see her. I stood at the podium in my dress uniform. The room went quiet in a way that felt like an invitation. My grandmother never asked for a medal, I said. She never asked for a headline. She spent 22 years funding surgeries, mortgages, college tuitions, and second chances for 247 veterans. She did it from a house worth $90,000. She wore the same coat for 14 years. She brewed her own coffee every morning and grew her own food and never once asked anyone to notice. She asked for one thing, that the people she helped would go on to help others. That's what this trust is. That's what she built. Theodore Banks sat in the front row, tears running down his face, not wiped, not hidden. General Elwood rose from his seat and walked to the podium with a mahogany plaque in his hands. The National Veterans Advocacy Coalition is honored to present the inaugural Dorothea Mercer Humanitarian Service Award, he said, recognizing silent service to those who served. He handed it to me. The room stood, all 300 people. The applause was nothing like the engagement party. That was correction. This was recognition. The kind Thea never wanted, but had earned every single day she sat at that kitchen table writing letters to people the world had forgotten. I held the plaque and felt its weight, heavier than the Purple Heart, lighter than everything I'd carried to get here. Thank you, Grandma, I said, just for her. A week after the gala, I was in Thea's kitchen, my kitchen now, though I still thought of it as hers, coffee brewing, rain tapping the window, when someone knocked. I opened the door. Lorraine stood on the porch in a raincoat, holding a cardboard box against her hip. No makeup again. She looked older than her 56 years and smaller, the way people look when the fight has finally cost them more than they thought it would. I found these in the attic, she said. I thought you should have them. Inside the box, under tissue paper, photographs. Thea in her Army Nurse Corps uniform, young and straight-backed and almost smiling, like she was daring the camera to underestimate her. Thea on a tarmac somewhere tropical, stethoscope around her neck. Thea shaking hands with a man in a colonel's insignia. Thea in civilian clothes, standing in front of this very house, the year penciled on the back in familiar handwriting, 1986, the year she bought it. Lorraine hadn't looked at these photographs in decades, maybe ever. Come in, I said. She hesitated. Then she crossed the threshold. First time in 5 years. She stood in the living room and turned slowly. I'd fixed it up, but the bones were the same. The floorboards, the curtains, the shelf where Thea kept her nursing manuals next to her recipe cards. Her whole life organized without pretense. She really loved this place, Lorraine said. Her voice was different. The strategy was gone. She loved what it represented, I said. A life without performing. Lorraine sat down at the kitchen table in the chair Thea had sat in every morning for 30 years. I poured her a cup of coffee. Hand-ground French press, the way Thea made it, strong enough to make your teeth ache. Lorraine held it with both hands and looked at me for a long moment. I'm not ready to apologize yet, she said, but I'm here. I sat down across from her. That's enough for today, Mom. We drank coffee in Thea's kitchen while the rain came down. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Sometimes presence is the apology. Sometimes showing up is the first word of a sentence you haven't learned to finish yet. Early morning, the first week of May. I sat at Thea's kitchen table. My kitchen table now, though I still thought of it as hers, and opened the leather notebook. 247 names in her handwriting. Each one a person she chose over comfort. Each one a debt she paid to people the world had decided to forget. I turned to the next blank page, picked up a pen, 248, Ellie Paulson, Dorothea Mercer Fellowship, Training Certification, 2025, first name in my handwriting in a notebook full of hers. The list was continuing. Outside, the dogwoods had finally bloomed. Late, the way they always are in Virginia, white blossoms on dark branches, quiet and stubborn and lasting. Thea planted those trees the year I was born. She said they'd bloom when they were ready and not a day before. I closed the notebook and slid it into my bag next to the summary letter from Marguerite, the purple heart in its velvet case, and the letter Thea wrote me in Geneva. Then I pulled on my uniform. Boots laced tight, cover squared. The face in the hallway mirror looked like someone my grandmother would have recognized. Not because of the rank or the ribbons, but because of what was behind the eyes. Before I walked out, I stopped at the framed photograph on the hallway shelf. Thea in her army greens, young and steady, looking directly at the camera like she was daring the world to underestimate her. I touched the frame. 248 now, Grandma. I opened the front door. The May air was warm and clean, smelling like cut grass and dogwood blossoms. A Carolina wren was singing from the rosemary bush, loud and certain, the way small things are when they don't know they're small. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and walked toward the day like a woman who knew exactly what she was carrying and why. Discipline is kindness. Kindness to your future self. She told me that my whole life. I finally understand what she meant. That's my story. My grandmother lived like she had nothing because she gave everything to people who had less. My family wanted her money. I chose her mission. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of someone in your life who gave without asking for credit, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. And here's a question I want to leave you with. If you had to choose between keeping the peace with your family and protecting something that mattered, what would you do? Tell me below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. There are more stories in the description. People like you and me, standing up when it costs everything,